Can you guys hear me in the back if I don't use the microphone? Very good, very good. Well, thank you. Well, enjoying it so far?
Yes.
Good. And now you just started this morning, right? So you're bright-eyed and ready to go throughout the day? Excellent. What time do you end tonight? Midnight to 11 o'clock? Lectures all day? Very good, very good.
We're going to get them out to touring later.
Well, Mark, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, to join you, and thank you again for hosting this year and starting this great tradition. It truly is, I think, one of the most important things and aspects that we could do is to make sure that we are connecting Coloradans to their government in Washington, D.C. And of course, we all have state staff and district offices too, so make sure that you connect with them when you go back home to Colorado so that you can continue this activism that you're starting today, and many of you are continuing today, so look forward to seeing many of you back home. So the 4th Congressional District is eastern Colorado. It's Fort Collins all the way down to the Oklahoma Panhandle. I mentioned last night it's 32,000 square miles of the Eastern Plains. Some of the important issues, of course, in the 4th Congressional District: agriculture, energy issues, energy development, technology, biotech companies, universities, Colorado State University. Last night when I saw Bruce Benson, and I don't see President Benson here, I was going to tell him last night that I graduated from Colorado's flagship university, Colorado State University, but I decided I'd be offending everybody in the room, with CU, but anyway, if he was here, I'd say the same thing. So the district itself is agriculture, from an agriculture perspective. Out of the 435 districts in Congress, this is the 11th most agricultural productive district in the nation. So agriculture is very important to the district. Energy development. We just met in Weld County, Colorado 2 weeks ago with some energy developers. There's 31 operating oil and gas companies right now in Weld County. 2 of them made their 2010 property tax payments this past month. One paid $52 million, one paid $57 million. 2 out of 31 made their property tax assessments paying over $100 million to schools, to the counties, to the communities. We also have wind manufacturing companies, wind blades, nacelle manufacturing. We have solar manufacturing. We have natural gas opportunities. It really is an incredible district. And so thank you for allowing me to share a little bit about the district. I live in a little town called Yuma. Anybody know where Yuma is? There's a few of you. If you don't know where Yuma is, it's out on the Eastern Plains between Otis and Eckley. Narrow it down a little bit. But grew up in a family farm equipment dealership. A family farm equipment dealership where I learned a lot about business, what it takes to make a business run, what it takes for the farmers and ranchers that we worked with every day to help make their ends meet, to make sure that they were able to operate, to hire, to grow. And that's really the #1 focus that we can talk about in this Congress. And I know Mark is certainly working on this as well, is what we can do to get this economy turned around, how we can fire up the engines of business once again in this nation. This is the 40th month in a row where unemployment has been at or above 8%. We have got to get people back to work, putting people to work, tearing down barriers that prevent people from hiring again, making sure that we're doing everything we can to advance Colorado businesses and those opportunities that we have in the Colorado economy. And I think there's 3 important ways to focus on that, and then I'll open it up to questions. What we can do from the first part, the 3 parts being tax reform, regulatory reform, and the issue of debt and deficit. Let's talk about tax reform. Anybody know what happened on April 1st? Besides being April Fool's Day? April Fool's Day, the United States became #1. We became #1 in the highest corporate tax rate in the world. Up until April 1st, we were #2. Japan was #1. Japan lowered theirs. We took over #1. I don't think that's something that we should be bragging about. I'll share with you a phone call that I got 2 years ago from a business in Denver. He called me up and he said, "Cory, my #1 competitor just moved overseas to Ireland to take advantage of their low corporate tax rates. That leaves me with the choice. I can either stay in Colorado, I can stay in the United States knowing that I'm going to have a competitor, my #1 competitor, with a bottom line that has more advantages than mine. Or I can stay here knowing that, or I can also stay here knowing there's a disadvantage to the bottom line, or I can go overseas and try to compete that way." What kind of a tax code is it when we're actually encouraging people to make a decision to stay in the United States and be less competitive, or to go overseas to try to be more competitive? We need overall tax reform. Many of the things that Dr. Rivlin said, some of the things I absolutely agree with when she talks about tax reform, and how we can use this opportunity of economic struggle to reform the tax code to create jobs and opportunity, to get people hiring once again in this country. The second thing we have to look at is the issue of regulatory reform. I meet with countless businesses day in and day out, both here in Washington, D.C. and back home in the district, who all point to one thing. It's the issue of uncertainty. The issue of uncertainty, whether it's the tax code or the issue of uncertainty when it comes to regulations. And what we can do to provide the regulatory stability that our businesses need in a thriving business environment. How do we go about doing that? There's a couple of things that we can do. Number one, oversight. I think this body, this Congress, the legislative branch, has failed not just in the past year or 2 years, but the past decade, the past 2 decades, when it comes to our role in oversight, to make sure that we are providing the oversight we need of the executive branch, regardless of who's in power, regardless if it's a Republican-controlled Congress, a Republican-controlled White House, a split governance, Democrat-controlled Congress, Democrat-controlled White House. The Congress has an obligation to step it up when it comes to our oversight role to make sure that regulations aren't hurting our businesses. There's a bill out there called the REINS Act that says simply this. In Colorado, we have a Rule Review Act. If you're familiar with the legislature and the Colorado General Assembly, every year they have a Rule Review Act, a rule review bill that comes up, and it takes in all of the rules that have been issued by the state agencies and puts them before the state legislature for an up or down vote. We ought to be doing the same kind of thing here in Congress. What can we be doing to take a look at the regulations that are coming out of the administration, the administrative branches, to say, you know what, these are good, or maybe these need a little bit more work, or maybe these shouldn't even go into place at all. Let's give Congress a chance to step it up in oversight. The REINS Act says if a regulation has an economic impact above a certain level, then it automatically goes to Congress for approval. Regulatory reform is something that we desperately need. But the third thing that I want to talk about, as part of our overall effort to improve our economy, is the issue of debt and deficit. We cannot grow our economy long term if we don't get a handle on the debt and deficit situation in this nation. Why is that? Because as businessmen and businesswomen, we know that the more debt there is at the federal level, the more deficits grow each year. It makes it more and more difficult for businesses to grow and expand. Why? Because they're competing. Their needs are competing with the needs of the government. What do I mean by that? I mean, when it comes to money, when it comes to equity, when it comes to private capital, to grow and expand a business, they are in direct competition with the strain that the government is then creating because of massive deficits and massive debt loads. And so higher taxes then become an option. The dollar is weakened because of a monetary policy that tries to handle the situation. And the third thing, private businesses have more and more difficult time getting access to loans, to money they need, because more and more money is being commanded by the government to finance and carry that debt and deficit. And so if we don't address tax reform, if we don't address regulatory issues, and if we don't address our debt and deficit issues, it will be very difficult to create the kind of long-term economic growth that this country needs. And I want to share with you one final story, and then I'll open it up to questions. This country faces a lot of significant challenges, but we're here because we believe this nation truly is the best country on the face of the best country on the face of the earth. And I had no idea. I knew that members of Congress were able to write letters of recommendation to the Air Force Academy, to West Point, for students, asking the academies if they would be appointed. But I had no idea that as a member of Congress, we got to be the first ones to call them and congratulate them on that appointment. And I'll share with you the first phone call that I made. It was to a young man in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I had his number, sat down at my desk, I called, and I got his mom on the phone. And I said, "Hi, this is Congressman Cory Gardner. Is your son there?" And the first thing out of her mouth was, "Why is the congressman calling my son?" So I thought, all right, this could have gone a little bit better. So the next thing I said, I thought this was great. I said, "Well, can you keep a secret?" And of course she's thinking, "Why does the congressman want me to keep a secret?" I said, "All right, well, I just wanted to be the first to let you know that your son has been offered a fully qualified appointment to West Point." And she started crying on the phone. And when he got on the phone, you could see that smile 2,000 miles away, from Colorado to Washington, D.C. And his mom said that's the only thing he's ever wanted to do in his life. And if that young man believes this country is worth putting it all on the line, if the people here from Colorado today believe that their country is worth coming to Washington, D.C., taking time away from your family and your businesses, and being a part of solutions for this nation, then we all know we have a responsibility to continue to stand up, fight, and to find these solutions so that we can indeed carry forward the greatest nation on the face of this earth. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Mark, thank you for doing this. We commend you for doing this.